In this video, we're talking about the RAY RTA by Coil Master. I'm Sherlock Holmes, and on this channel I do reviews like this, build tutorials, live shows, all kinds of cool stuff, so if you're new here, definitely consider subscribing. As I said, we're talking about the RAY RTA, manufactured by Coil Master. This thing is a little beast. Specs first, guys, 24mm RDA, 2.5 milliliter capacity. Right now I'm only seeing it in black, and it's only $26. First, I'm going to throw a build in it, and then I'll show you the whole thing piece by piece. First things first, the build quality is really solid. Now the threads, especially with the chimney meets the deck, they're not the greatest. The top cap, the fill portion cap, that one's not too bad. That one goes on nice and smooth. Other than that, everything is really nice and built really well. It's got gold-plated 510, which is adjustable and holds the deck into the base. It protrudes quite a bit. I personally am currently using it on a hybrid mech mod. Airflow control ring is nice and smooth with a nice hard stop either way. The O-rings do their job. Overall, I'm impressed with the quality, especially because it's only $26. We're gonna start with the deck. As you saw in the build, we have a velocity style deck, which personally I'm not a massive fan of because I don't like my leads being squished from the side. I'd rather them be clamped from the top down. The velocity style deck is very easy to build with, especially for something like round wire. Even with flatter, fatter builds, it's pretty damn easy to build. And because these post holes are so big, I've been able to fit some pretty decent builds in here. Granted, you don't have a ton of space. It is an RTA and only 24mm at that, because you know, you're just not. The posts have hex screws, which I'm not a big fan. They're my least favorite kind of screw because I strip them out real easily, but it does include extras. Another cool thing about the velocity style deck is that it does give you build options. You can set your coils a little bit higher, you can set them lower, you could put one lead in the top, one lead in the bottom, both on the bottom, both on the top, so you can really play around with how you want to install your builds and whatever's easiest for you. If it vapes, there's no wrong way to do it, as long as you're doing it safely. For an RTA, this has a lot of space inside the chimney. I was pleasantly surprised with the width of the builds that I was able to put in here. So you can see there at the bottom of the deck, right underneath each coil, you're going to have one massive slot for the airflow to come up. Very directional hit right to your coils coming right underneath. Really helps with flavor. And you can see the 4 individual wick holes that it has. I'm a big fan of how this thing wicks. I haven't had any issues with flooding or leaking or anything like that. It's been very easy to build and wick. The size of the wick holes are great. They let a lot of juice in, so I haven't had any dry hits whatsoever. You just need enough cotton in those holes to prevent it from flooding. I like to wick it a little bit lighter, that way I get quicker wicking. If you unscrew the 510 pin, the deck will come apart from the base, and then you can see the direct airflow holes leading right up to your coil, and you can see how the air comes in from those airflow holes on the side of the base and then go directly up. And that brings us into the airflow. We have the 2 airflow slots, and they're nice, decent size, so they're letting in quite a bit of air. This isn't a hurricane style airflow. It's not like breathing through it. It is slightly restricted. There's still plenty of airflow with this thing. And if you want to, you can close them down pretty tight and really restrict that airflow, if that's something you're into. As I said previously, the airflow control ring is nice and smooth. I haven't had any issues with it at all. It's smooth, and the O-rings there are nice and tight. I haven't accidentally bumped it or have it shift or anything like that on me. It stays where I place it. The airflow is fantastic. The airflow is a little loud. Here's completely wide open. Sometimes I get a little bit of a whistle on it, but it's not that bad. It's definitely a loud airflow though. Here's closed down halfway. I get hell of a whistle there, and then I'm gonna close it down to just a little tiny hole. Really smooth all the way through, no matter how I have it set. For the most part, I like it wide open. It gives me a boisterous, like almost a little turbulent, really swooshy, beautiful airflow, which really works well with the way that I like to vape. So I generally build low, use high wattage and wide open, which gives me a good amount of flavor and a lot of clouds. But if you wanted to have it a little bit cooler, a lot smoother, not so turbulent, you can definitely build a higher resistance and close it down a little bit. You have some options. If you want it a little bit more mild, a lot more flavor, you can shut it down halfway, build it a little higher, and it really enhances the flavor. Overall, the flavor is spectacular from this thing. It's not top of the line flavor. It's not gonna, blow your socks off, but it is very decent. I'm vaping a juice I know very well, which is Wild Buffalo by Hometown Hero. It's a root beer float flavor, and there's a lot of nuance in this juice. It's a root beer float, so there's the vanilla ice cream in it, and depending on the device, if it's not a really good flavor device, I'll lose those vanilla tones. But with this, I'm getting all of it. It's really well balanced, and I can taste all the different notes, so I'm impressed with the flavor on this thing. And again, I think a lot of the flavor comes from that airflow being directly underneath the coil. Generally speaking, a lot of these new RTAs have great flavor, and this is right along with them. I was a huge fan of Coil Master's Alfie RTA, which is the single coil, and this is kind of like its big dual coil brother. It has a perfect balance between clouds and flavor for me, and as I said, that airflow is fantastic in exactly the way that I like it. The price is fantastic. This is worth every penny of $26. You get a lot for that $26. I personally love the aesthetics. I love that little brass gold looking band there at the bottom, and when you start shutting the airflow down, you get a little bit more of that brass or gold or whatever, and I just think it looks great. This thing performs well. It's satisfying for me. Again, I've had no dry hits, I haven't had any issues with leaking, and it was simple to build and wick. So I think this is great for somebody who's just getting into RTAs because it is so easy. Now, some things that I didn't like about this RTA, the fact that it completely destroys juice. I'm just constantly filling this thing. It does have something to do with the way that I vape it, really hot, fast, wide open. So I am drinking a lot of juice that way, but I would have loved to see a higher capacity on this thing. The flavor is very good, but it could be way better. There are RTAs on the market that have way better flavor than this, but it's still up there. One of my biggest gripes with this thing is that it does have that 810 drip tip, right? It comes with an 810, but my other 810 drip tips don't really fit in here. There's a couple that have a thicker male end. Those ones will fit, but most of them don't. That's a bummer for me. Definitely, I would have loved to throw in a red drip tip on this, or really any other drip tip, but very few of the drip tips that I have fit. And another thing to go along with the drip tip is the fact that it doesn't have a 510 option. With the absence of a 510 adapter or anything like that, you're limited almost completely to the drip tip that's in here. That's not a major deal breaker, but I don't know, it's a little annoyance. Another thing I would have liked to see is with the fill hole section, I feel like they could have squeezed a little bit more capacity into this had they not recessed the holes so much. I feel like the threads could have been on the outside and maybe get some extra capacity. And I have found that regardless of how careful I am, when I fill this, when I go to put the top back on, I always get a little bit of juice that squishes out of the top. And so if I don't want that to happen, I've got to wipe it down every time, and it's not great for like quick refills. My biggest gripes are the velocity deck. It's easy to build on, people love that style, but preferably for me, I'm not a big fan of the velocity style. The drip tips, or the lack of drip tips, I guess I should say. Oh, and one other thing, the wick holes. I'm not a big fan of this type of wicking system where you have to like squish the wick up against the cutout and then screw the chimney down on it. That can be a hassle. It could be a little bit of a pain in the ass, especially if you oversaturate that cotton. When you're going to push it in, then you've got a little bit of a juicy mess if you're going to pre-saturate the wicks. I don't know, guys. I'm trying to find something to bitch about, but there's really not much. Coil Coil Master has done a great job with everything they've released this year so far, surpassed my expectations for sure. Overall, for 26 bucks, I highly recommend this RTA. I will put links in the description where you can find this for yourself. Go check it out if you'd like. 26 bucks, man, you really can't go wrong. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Sherlock Holmes. Karate chop that like button if you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed and press the bell. YouTube has been fucked about sending people notifications. So if you want to get notified when I post something new, make sure you have that bell on. That will just make sure that you get the notification. Pretty soon, guys, I'm going to start posting blogs. Definitely keep an eye out for those. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Sherlock Holmes, and I'll see you next time.